This isn't just sloppy bookkeeping. These are forged invoices, fake maintenance contracts, and they all lead back to you, Luke.
The wine glass had lipstick on it. Not Zoe's shade, too dark, too bold for my wife's carefully curated suburban aesthetic. I stood in our garage at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, staring at the evidence of my perfectly orchestrated life falling apart, and all I could think was, finally. My name is Ethan Crowley, and I'm an architect who designs McMansions for people with more money than taste. At 39, I've mastered the art of nodding politely while clients explain why they need a wine cellar in Texas and a chandelier in their bathroom. It's the same skill I've used for the past 3 years watching my marriage crumble in slow motion. Ethan, what are you doing out there? Zoe's voice drifted through the door connecting our garage to the kitchen. Sweet as honey, sharp as a blade, the tone she used when she wanted something or was hiding something. Tonight, I suspected both. I set the wine glass back on my workbench exactly where I'd found it, next to a bottle of Malbec that cost more than most people's car payments. Just checking the water heater, I called back. Heard some weird noises earlier. The lie came easily. After 15 years of marriage, we'd both become fluent in casual deception. I walked back inside to find Zoe loading our dishwasher with the remnants of another wine and wine night with her girlfriends. She wore yoga pants that cost $200 and a tank top that showed off the results of her daily Pilates sessions. At 35, she looked better than she had at 25, and she made sure everyone knew it. "How was girls' night?" I asked, settling into my usual spot at the kitchen island. "Oh, you know how it is." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Carla's going through another crisis with Brad, Priya's obsessing over her Instagram followers, the usual drama." I nodded, watching her move around our kitchen with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Anyone new tonight?" The pause was microscopic, but I caught it. 15 years of marriage teaches you to read the spaces between words. "Just the regular group," she said, not meeting my eyes. Though Carla did bring her brother Luke. "You remember Luke Mendez, the real estate guy?" Ah, Luke Mendez. 6'2", gym-obsessed, drove a custom Jeep Wrangler with more modifications than a NASCAR vehicle. The kind of man who called everyone buddy and thought a firm handshake was a personality trait. "Right, Luke." I kept my voice neutral. Didn't realize Carla's real estate seminars had become part of girls' night. Zoe's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a tornado, pretty from a distance, chaotic up close. "He just stopped by to drop off some papers for Carla. Stayed for one drink. One drink that required lipstick transfer and a private conversation in our garage." "Interesting." "That's nice," I said. "Always good to support local business." She shot me a look, trying to gauge whether there was sarcasm in my tone. There wasn't. Not yet. I'd learned long ago that the best way to catch someone in a lie was to give them enough rope to hang themselves. "I'm going to bed," she announced, suddenly busy with wiping down counters that were already spotless. Early morning tomorrow. Big day at the office. Zoe worked as an HR director for a mid-sized tech company, a job that seemed to involve more networking events than actual work. She was good at it. Managing people came naturally to someone who'd been managing me for over a decade. "Board meeting," she said. "Need to look sharp." She kissed my cheek as she passed, a perfunctory gesture that smelled like wine and guilt. I watched her disappear up the stairs, then sat alone in our kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. Our home was everything Zoe had dreamed of when we'd moved to this development 3 years ago. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, granite countertops, and an open floor plan perfect for entertaining. It was also soul-crushingly generic, identical to half the houses on our street, except for minor variations in paint color and landscaping. I'd wanted something with character, maybe one of the older homes closer to downtown Austin. But Zoe had fallen in love with the idea of being part of Willowbrook Estates, with its HOA meetings and block parties and the kind of neighbors who measured their worth in square footage and luxury car brands. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent my career designing dream homes while living in a nightmare of my own creation. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry, my colleague and closest friend at the architectural firm where we both worked. How was the estrogen festival tonight? I typed back, educational, very educational. That good, huh? Want to grab lunch tomorrow? I've got gossip about the Henderson project. Sure, usual place? You know it. Try not to get into any trouble before then. If only he knew how tempting that was becoming. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, passing the framed photos that lined our hallway like a museum exhibit of happiness. Zoe and me on our wedding day, both of us young and stupid enough to believe in forever. Family vacations to places we couldn't afford, smiling for cameras while fighting about money in private. Our daughters, Mia and Ellie, the only two people in this house who still looked at me like I mattered. Mia, 15 and wise beyond her years, had inherited my sarcasm and Zoe's beauty, a dangerous combination that terrified me daily. Ellie, 10 and still optimistic about the world, believed her parents were happy because we'd gotten very good at performing happiness for her benefit. I found Zoe already in bed, scrolling through her phone with the intensity of someone conducting national security surveillance. The blue light from her screen cast shadows across her face, highlighting the small lines that had appeared around her eyes over the past few years. "What's so interesting?" I asked, settling on my side of the bed. "Just checking tomorrow's schedule," she said without looking up. "Busy week." I nodded and picked up the book from my nightstand, a biography of Frank Lloyd Wright that I'd been reading for 3 months. The words blurred together as my mind wandered back to that wine glass in the garage. Luke Mendez, real estate mogul, Carla's brother, and apparently my wife's new drinking buddy. I'd met him a few times at neighborhood events, the kind of man who dominated conversations and laughed too loud at his own jokes. He was everything I wasn't, aggressive, flashy, confident in the way that only came from never being told no. The kind of man Zoe had probably wished she'd married instead of a sarcastic architect who designed other people's dreams for a living. "Ethan?" Zoe's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you happy?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I set down my book and looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. "Are you?" I asked back. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know anymore." It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. "Yeah," I said. "Me neither." We lay there in the darkness, two strangers sharing a bed and a mortgage and a life that had somehow become too small for both of us. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic from the highway, carrying people to places that weren't here. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start paying closer attention to my wife's schedule, and to Luke Mendez, and to the lipstick stains that appeared in my garage after girls' night. After all, I was an architect. I knew how to read blueprints, how to spot structural weaknesses before they brought down the whole building. And this house of cards we'd built together was showing some very interesting cracks. The next morning arrived with the kind of artificial cheerfulness that only suburban Texas could produce. I stood at my kitchen window, watching our neighbor Mrs. Halloran walk her ancient Pomeranian while simultaneously texting on her phone, probably updating the neighborhood gossip network about who'd left their garbage cans out too long. Zoe had left early for her board meeting, kissing the girls goodbye with the enthusiasm of someone fleeing a crime scene. Mia noticed, of course. My 15-year-old had inherited my talent for reading between the lines. "Mom's acting weird," she said, stirring her cereal with the kind of aggressive precision that meant she was thinking hard about something. "Weird how?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "I don't know. Just different. Like she's pretending to be happy instead of actually being happy." Out of the mouths of babes. Ellie, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around our breakfast table, chattered about her upcoming science project while I packed their lunches. Normal dad stuff, the kind of routine that had anchored my days for the past decade. "Dad, can you help me with my volcano tonight?" Ellie asked, bouncing in her chair with 10-year-old enthusiasm. "Absolutely. We'll make it the best volcano Franklin Elementary has ever seen." Mia rolled her eyes. "You said that about my volcano 5 years ago." And I was right then, too. The morning routine continued its familiar rhythm, but something had shifted. Maybe it was knowing about the wine glass, or maybe it was Zoe's question from the night before, but everything felt slightly off-kilter, like a picture hanging crooked on a wall. After dropping the girls at school, I drove to my office in downtown Austin, a converted warehouse that our firm had renovated into something that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Terry was already at his desk, surrounded by the controlled chaos of blueprints and coffee cups that marked him as a fellow survivor of the design world. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you too, sunshine." Terry Martinez was the closest thing I had to a best friend, a relationship built on shared cynicism and mutual appreciation for good coffee. He was also the only person at work who knew that my marriage was held together by habit and stubbornness rather than love. "Seriously, what's wrong?" he asked, studying my face with the attention he usually reserved for structural engineering problems. I told him about the wine glass, about Luke Mendez, about the growing certainty that my wife was having an affair with a man who probably used more hair product than she did. "Snake," Terry said when I finished. "You sure?" Sure enough to start paying attention. "What are you going to do?" It was a good question. The old me, the me from 6 months ago, would have confronted Zoe directly, demanded explanations, tried to save a marriage that had been dying by inches for years. But something had changed. Maybe it was the relief I'd felt seeing that lipstick stain, proof that this wasn't all in my head, that the distance between us had a name and a face and a custom Jeep. "I'm going to watch," I said, "and wait." "That's very zen of you. That's very strategic of me." Terry grinned, the expression of someone who'd been waiting years for his friend to grow a backbone. "Need any help with the watching and waiting?" "Actually, yes. You still have those surveillance apps on your phone? The ones you used to catch your ex cheating?" "Brother, do I ever—" We spent the next hour planning what Terry cheerfully called Operation Homewrecker. It was surprisingly easy to track someone's digital footprint when you knew what to look for: social media check-ins, credit card transactions, the kind of data trail that modern life made inevitable. The first red flag appeared within 20 minutes. "Your wife checked into the Driscoll Hotel bar yesterday at 2:30 p.m., Terry said, scrolling through location data. "Tagged with someone named Luke Mendez, the Driscoll. Downtown Austin's fanciest hotel, the kind of place you went when you wanted to impress someone or when you were conducting business that required privacy." "Board meeting, my ass," I muttered. "Gets better." "Look at this." Terry turned his laptop screen toward me, showing Luke's Instagram account. The most recent post was from yesterday afternoon, a photo of 2 wine glasses at what was unmistakably the Driscoll's bar, captioned, "Celebrating New Partnerships," with a winking emoji. Posted at 3:15 p.m., Terry noted. "Same day your wife was supposedly in board meetings all afternoon?" I stared at the image, noting the lipstick stain on one of the glasses, the same dark shade I'd found in my garage. "They're not even trying to hide it," I said. "Amateurs," Terry agreed. "Want me to dig deeper?" "Oh yes, dig away." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of architectural drawings and mounting evidence. By lunch, we had a timeline that painted a clear picture of my wife's afternoon activities. The Driscoll at 2:30, dinner at an upscale restaurant at 6 South, and then, based on credit card records, a stop at a liquor store for expensive wine before heading home for girls' night. "She bought the Malbec," Terry announced with the satisfaction of a detective solving a case. "Same brand you found in your garage, $90 bottle. She's spending $90 on wine for her affair. Inflation's hit everything, man. Despite everything, I laughed. It felt good, like pressure releasing from a valve I hadn't realized was stuck. "So what's the plan?" Terry asked. "I need to see this for myself. Confirm what we already know. And then I'm going to make them both very, very sorry." The opportunity came sooner than expected. That afternoon, Zoe texted to say she was working late, another emergency meeting that would keep her at the office until at least 9. Except her office building's parking lot was empty when I drove by at 7:30. I found her car at the Driscoll. I parked across the street and waited, feeling like a character in one of those noir novels I'd loved in college. The hotel's valet stand offered a perfect view of the entrance, and I settled in for what I assumed would be a long surveillance session. I didn't have to wait long. At 8:15, Zoe and Luke emerged from the hotel's main entrance, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing at something that was apparently hilarious. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months, relaxed, animated, alive in a way that made my chest tight with something that might have been grief. They walked to her car like they had all the time in the world, like they weren't destroying 2 marriages and God knew how many lives with their afternoon entertainment. Luke said something that made Zoe throw her head back and laugh, the genuine laugh I remembered from our early days together. Then he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, not an accidental brush of lips. A real kiss, the kind that left no doubt about intentions or feelings or the complete collapse of my marriage. I sat in my car across the street, watching my wife kiss another man, and felt something inside me break clean in half. Not my heart. That had been cracking for years. Something deeper. Something that had to do with respect and dignity and the person I'd thought I was. They separated, and Zoe got in her car. Luke walked to his ridiculous Jeep, and they drove off in opposite directions, probably coordinating via text about when and where to meet next. I sat there for another 10 minutes, watching the hotel entrance and thinking about the past 15 years of my life. The compromises I'd made, the dreams I'd deferred, the slow erosion of everything I'd thought mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Meeting running late." "Don't wait up." I typed back, "No problem. Love you." The lie tasted like ashes. I drove home to find Mia doing homework at the kitchen table and Ellie watching cartoons in the living room. Normal evening activities in our abnormal life. "Where's Mom?" Mia asked, without looking up from her math problems. "Working late." She made a sound that might have been agreement or skepticism. At 15, she was old enough to notice patterns, smart enough to draw conclusions. "Dad?" she said quietly. "Are you and Mom okay?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw worry in her dark eyes, the kind of anxiety that kids shouldn't have to carry. "We're figuring some things out," I said carefully. "But whatever happens, you and Ellie are the most important thing in the world to us. That never changes." She nodded, but I could see she wasn't entirely convinced. Smart kid. I helped Ellie with her volcano project, mixing baking soda and vinegar while she provided running commentary on the chemical reaction. Normal dad stuff, except nothing felt normal anymore. Zoe came home at 10:30, full of apologies and explanations about client emergencies and last-minute presentations. She kissed my cheek and asked about the girls and performed the role of devoted wife and mother with Academy Award-worthy conviction. If I hadn't seen her with Luke 3 hours earlier, I might have believed her. "How was your day?" she asked, settling next to me on the couch. "Productive," I said. "Very educational." She gave me a sharp look, but I was already reaching for the remote, ending the conversation before it could begin. We watched the news together, 2 people sharing a couch and a life and absolutely nothing else. When she went upstairs, I stayed behind, staring at our wedding photo on the mantel and thinking about wine glasses and lipstick stains and the sound of my wife laughing with another man. Tomorrow, I decided, the real work would begin. The neighborhood HOA meeting was held the 3rd Thursday of every month in the community center, a beige building that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard architecture described but never actually seen it. I'd been attending these meetings for 3 years, mostly to protect our property values, and occasionally to watch our neighbors argue about lawn maintenance with the passion of people who'd never had real problems. Tonight's meeting promised to be different. I'd spent the past 2 weeks gathering intelligence, building a case file that would have made the FBI proud. Terry had helped, using his technical skills to map out Zoe and Luke's affair with the precision of a military operation. Hotel visits, restaurant reservations, credit card transactions, a digital trail that painted a clear picture of two people who thought they were smarter than they actually were. More importantly, I'd discovered that Luke was scheduled to present a development proposal at tonight's meeting. Something about expanding the commercial district near our neighborhood, a project that would require community support and city approval. Perfect timing. I arrived early and claimed a seat in the back row, close enough to observe, but far enough away to avoid immediate attention. The community center filled slowly with the usual suspects: retirees with nothing better to do, young families worried about property values, and the handful of local business owners who saw every HOA meeting as a networking opportunity. Zoe arrived at 7:15, sliding into a seat near the front with her usual group of friends. She wore a blue dress that I'd bought her for her birthday last year, back when I still believed our marriage was worth saving. She looked beautiful, confident, completely unaware that her world was about to shift on its axis. Luke showed up 5 minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of smile that suggested he thought this was going to be easy. He nodded at various people in the crowd, working the room like a politician at a campaign rally. He didn't notice me. Neither did Zoe. The meeting began with the usual bureaucratic theater: minutes from the last meeting, treasurer's report, complaints about dog waste and parking violations. I sat through it all with the patience of a hunter waiting for the perfect shot. Next on our agenda, announced Patricia Walsh, our HOA president, we have a presentation from Luke Mendez of Mendez Properties regarding the proposed Willowbrook Commercial District expansion. Luke stood up, all confidence and charm, and began his pitch: mixed-use development, increased property values, convenient shopping and dining options. The kind of presentation he'd probably given 100 times before. I waited until he was halfway through his PowerPoint before I raised my hand. "I have a question about the environmental impact study," I said, standing up. Luke paused, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "I'm sorry, could you state your name for the record?" "Ethan Crowley. I live at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive." I saw Zoe's shoulders tense. She turned slightly, probably wondering why her husband was suddenly taking an interest in community development. "What's your question, Mr. Crowley?" "I was reviewing the documentation you submitted to the City Planning Commission," I said, pulling out a folder thick with papers. "According to the environmental assessment, this project will require the removal of approximately 40 mature oak trees, some of which are over 50 years old." Luke's smile faltered slightly. That's correct. But we'll be implementing a comprehensive replanting program." "With saplings," I interrupted, "which will take decades to provide the same environmental benefits as the trees you're destroying. I'm curious about how you plan to mitigate the immediate impact on local wildlife habitats." The room had gone quiet. This wasn't the kind of question Luke had been expecting, and it showed. "Well, we've consulted with environmental specialists. Dr. Sarah Chen from UT's Environmental Science Department?" I asked, consulting my notes. Because according to her preliminary report, which I have here, she recommended against this particular location due to the presence of a migrating bird corridor. Luke's face was starting to show cracks in its confident facade. "I'm not sure where you're getting your information." "Public records," I said cheerfully. "Amazing what you can find when you actually do your research." I spent the next 20 minutes systematically dismantling Luke's presentation, armed with facts and figures that he clearly hadn't expected anyone to verify. Traffic impact studies that didn't account for school pickup times. drainage plans that ignored the natural watershed, financial projections that seemed optimistic to the point of fantasy. The audience was eating it up. Nothing made suburban homeowners happier than watching someone else get publicly humiliated, especially when property values were involved. "Mr. Crowley," Luke said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "I appreciate your thoroughness, but I think you might be overcomplicating what's really a straightforward development project." "Overcomplicating," I repeated, as if the word was foreign to me. "I'm an architect, Mr. Mendez. Attention to detail is literally my job. Unlike some people, I believe in doing my homework before making public presentations." The barb hit home. Luke's jaw tightened, and I could see him struggling to maintain his professional composure. "Perhaps we should table this discussion," Patricia suggested, clearly sensing the tension in the room. "Actually," I said, "I have one more question. About Mr. Mendez's qualifications for this project." Luke straightened, probably thinking he was back on solid ground. "I've been in commercial real estate for over 15 years. Yes, I saw that in your bio, very impressive. Though I notice you didn't mention the lawsuit filed against you last year by the Riverside Gardens Homeowners Association. Something about misrepresented environmental impacts and cost overruns that bankrupted the project?" The room erupted in murmurs. Luke's face went white, then red. "That lawsuit was dismissed. Settled out of court," I corrected, "for an undisclosed amount, along with the one filed by Cedar Creek Properties in 2019 and the complaint filed with the Better Business Bureau by Sunset Acres Development in 2020. I'd done my homework all right. 3 weeks of digging through public records, court filings, and business databases. Luke Mendez wasn't just a mediocre developer, he was a mediocre developer with a pattern of over-promising and under-delivering. "I think," I said, closing my folder with theatrical precision, "that our community deserves better than someone who treats environmental protection and financial transparency as optional suggestions." The applause started slowly, then built to something approaching enthusiasm. I sat down, feeling better than I had in months. Luke tried to salvage his presentation, but the damage was done. The questions that followed were hostile, skeptical, the kind of community pushback that killed development projects before they got off the ground. After the meeting, people approached me with congratulations and business cards. Apparently, taking down a smooth-talking developer made me temporarily popular with the suburban crowd. Zoe appeared at my elbow as I was shaking hands with Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street. "That was quite a performance," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Just doing my civic duty." "Since when do you care about HOA politics?" I looked at her, this woman I'd been married to for 15 years, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Since I realized how important it is to protect what matters to me." She studied my face, looking for hidden meanings. She wouldn't find any. I'd gotten very good at hiding my thoughts over the past few weeks. "We should get home," she said finally. "It's getting late. You go ahead. I want to talk to a few more people about the environmental impact study." She hesitated, clearly wanting to say something else, but Patricia Walsh chose that moment to approach with questions about the bird corridor report. I watched Zoe leave, noting that she stopped to exchange a few words with Luke near the exit. Even from across the room, I could see the tension in their body language, the way they stood just a little too close for casual conversation. Luke glanced in my direction once, his expression unreadable. I gave him a cheerful wave. By the time I got home, Zoe was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. I brushed my teeth and settled in next to her, picking up my Frank Lloyd Wright biography like nothing had happened. "Ethan," she said quietly, "what you did tonight, that was pretty ruthless." I considered various responses, then settled on honesty. "I'm just getting started." She was quiet for a long time after that. The next morning, I woke up to find a text from Terry. "Dude, you're famous. Someone posted video of the meeting on the neighborhood Facebook page. Luke's getting roasted in the comments." I scrolled through the social media aftermath while drinking my coffee. The video had been shared dozens of times with comments ranging from congratulatory to gleefully vicious. Luke's development proposal was effectively dead, and his reputation in our community had taken a beating that would be hard to recover from. More importantly, I'd sent a message. Not just to Luke, but to Zoe, and to anyone else who might be underestimating the quiet architect who'd been letting life happen to him for too long. The game had officially begun, and I was just getting warmed up. The fallout from the HOA meeting spread through our neighborhood like wildfire through dry grass. By Friday morning, Luke's development proposal had been withdrawn, and his name had become synonymous with shoddy research and environmental negligence. The neighborhood Facebook page buzzed with commentary, memes, and increasingly creative variations on the theme of doing your homework. I was enjoying my morning coffee and the digital carnage when Zoe appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for work and radiating the kind of controlled anger that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "We need to talk," she announced. "Good morning to you too, sunshine. Coffee?" "I'm serious, Ethan." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Not the vague anxiety that had characterized our marriage lately, but genuine, specific fear of what I might do next. "About what?" I asked, settling into my usual spot at the kitchen island. "About what you did to Luke at that meeting." "What I did?" I asked questions, presented facts, participated in local democracy. "You humiliated him. I informed our neighbors about his professional history. There's a difference." Zoe paced to the window, then back to the counter, her heels clicking against our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. "You made him look like a fool." "I didn't have to make him look like anything. His own track record spoke for itself." "That's not the point." "What is the point, Zoe?" I interrupted, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're awfully concerned about the professional reputation of someone who's supposedly just your friend's brother." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Zoe's face went through several expressions before settling on wounded innocence. "He's a friend of the family. Of course I'm concerned." "A friend of the family." I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting each word. "Is that what we're calling it?" Another silence. This one lasted long enough for me to finish my coffee and rinse the cup in our stainless steel sink. "I don't know what you're implying," Zoe said finally. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts, just like I did at the meeting. Luke Mendez is a mediocre developer with a history of failed projects. Those are facts. What you choose to do with that information is up to you." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, leaving her standing in our kitchen with her mouth slightly open and her carefully constructed narrative crumbling around her feet. The drive to work gave me time to think about strategy. The HOA meeting had been a warning shot, a demonstration that the quiet, accommodating Ethan Crowley was no longer in residence. But it was just the beginning. Real revenge required patience, planning, and a thorough understanding of your enemy's weaknesses. Luke's weaknesses were obvious: professional incompetence masked by charm, a reputation built on smoke and mirrors, and an ego that couldn't handle public humiliation. He was also, based on my surveillance, the kind of man who documented his life obsessively on social media, creating a digital trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Zoe's weaknesses were more subtle but potentially more devastating. She cared deeply about appearances, about what other people thought, about maintaining the image of the perfect suburban wife and mother. Her identity was built on social approval, professional success, and the admiration of her peer group. Both of them had made the mistake of thinking I was harmless. "You look like someone who just won the lottery," Terry observed when I arrived at the office. "Better. I look like someone who just realized he's been playing the wrong game for 15 years. I spent the morning working on actual architecture, a custom home for clients who appreciated craftsmanship over square footage. It felt good to focus on something constructive, something that would outlast the people who commissioned it. At lunch, Terry and I met at our usual spot, a food truck that served the kind of barbecue that made Austin famous. Between bites of brisket, I outlined my next moves. "So, you're going full scorched earth," Terry said. "I'm going full truth. There's a difference." Is there, though? It was a fair question. The line between justice and revenge had been blurring in my mind over the past few weeks, but I'd convinced myself that what I was doing was fundamentally about honesty. Exposing lies, revealing character, letting people see who they were really dealing with. "Luke's been coasting on charm and connections for years," I said. "Zoe's been coasting on the assumption that I'll always be there to clean up her messes. Maybe it's time for both of them to face some consequences." "And if those consequences destroy your marriage?" "Terry, my marriage has been over for years. We've just been too polite to admit it." He nodded, understanding passing between us like a shared language. Terry had been through his own divorce, knew the signs of a relationship that had died but refused to lie down. "What do you need from me?" "Keep monitoring their digital footprints. I want to know where they go, what they do, who they talk to. And see if you can find any other women Luke's been mentoring in real estate." "You think there are others?" "Men like Luke don't usually limit themselves to one affair. They're collectors." Terry's grin was sharp as a blade. "This is going to be fun." That evening, I arrived home to find Mia in the kitchen, making herself a snack with the focused intensity of someone trying not to think about something else. "Hey, kiddo. How was school?" "Fine." She didn't look up from her sandwich construction. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I sat down across from her, studying her face, so much like Zoe's, but with an intelligence and directness that was purely her own. "What makes you ask that?" "You've been acting weird, both of you. And this morning I heard Mom on the phone with Aunt Carla, talking about lawyers and custody and stuff." Lawyers and custody. So Zoe was already planning her exit strategy. Interesting. "Your mom and I are having some problems," I said carefully. "Adult problems that have nothing to do with you and Ellie. But you might get divorced." "Maybe. I don't know yet." Mia nodded, accepting the honesty with the resilience that teenagers develop when their world starts shifting beneath their feet. "If you do get divorced, can I live with you?" The question broke something inside me that I hadn't realized was still intact. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Sweetheart, whatever happens between your mother and me, we both love you and Ellie more than anything in the world. That will never change." "That's not what I asked." Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. "If it comes to that, we'll figure it out together. All of us." She squeezed my hand, then went back to her sandwich. "For what it's worth, I think Mom's being stupid." "Mia, I know you're not supposed to say stuff like that about your parents. But she is. You're the best dad ever, and she's acting like you don't matter." I felt my throat tighten with emotion I hadn't expected. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me." Zoe came home late again, full of apologies and explanations that sounded increasingly hollow. She kissed the girls goodnight, performed her evening routine with mechanical precision, and settled into bed next to me like we were strangers sharing a hotel room. "Mia asked me if we were getting divorced," I said into the darkness. Zoe went very still. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that we're having problems. Ethan, she also mentioned that you've been talking to lawyers." Another silence. This one lasted long enough for me to count my heartbeats. "I was just exploring options," Zoe said finally, "trying to understand what our choices might be." Our choices. That's an interesting way to put it. "What do you want me to say?" I turned to face her in the darkness, this woman who'd shared my bed for 15 years and now felt like a complete stranger. "I want you to say whatever's true, Zoe. Just once, I'd like to hear you tell the truth about something." She was quiet for so long, I thought the conversation was over. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't think I remember how to do that anymore. It was the saddest thing she'd ever said to me, and possibly the most honest. Yeah, I said. Me neither. We lay there in the darkness, two people who'd forgotten how to be real with each other, listening to the sound of our marriage finally admitting it was dying. But I wasn't ready to let it die quietly. Not anymore. Saturday morning brought the kind of Texas heat that made smart people stay indoors and stupid people plan outdoor activities. I was apparently in the latter category, having volunteered to help with the neighborhood block party, an annual celebration of suburban conformity that usually involved overpriced bounce houses and undercooked hamburgers. This year, I had different plans for the festivities. I'd spent the past week preparing with the thoroughness of a general planning a military campaign. Terry had provided intelligence, Mia had unwittingly served as a source of information about Zoe's schedule, and I'd used my architectural skills to design what I privately called Operation Public Accountability. The block party was perfect for my purposes, a captive audience of neighbors, plenty of witnesses, and the kind of informal atmosphere where shocking revelations could spread like wildfire through the crowd. I arrived early to help with setup, earning appreciative nods from the organizing committee. Ethan Crowley, reliable neighbor and devoted family man, always willing to volunteer for community events. If only they knew. Ethan? Patricia Walsh, our HOA president, waved me over to the beverage station. Thank goodness you're here. We need someone tall to hang the banner. I spent the next hour performing various setup tasks, all while keeping an eye on the growing crowd. Families with small children, teenagers reluctantly dragged from their phones, retirees grateful for something to do on a Saturday afternoon. Zoe arrived at 11 with Ellie in tow, both of them dressed in coordinated summer outfits that screamed perfect suburban family. She scanned the crowd, probably looking for Luke, who had yet to make an appearance. Dad! Ellie ran over to hug me, her face bright with excitement. Can I get my face painted? Of course, sweetheart. After lunch, okay? Zoe approached more cautiously, still radiating the tension that had characterized our interactions since the HOA meeting. You're here early, she observed. Volunteer work. Someone has to help make this community the special place it is. She gave me a sharp look, searching for sarcasm in my tone. There wasn't any, not yet. Where's Mia? I asked. Sleeping in. She said she'd walk over later. At 15, Mia had developed the teenager's natural aversion to forced family fun. I didn't blame her. The party progressed with typical suburban efficiency. Kids bounced in inflatable castles while adults clustered around folding tables, engaging in the kind of small talk that substituted for actual conversation. I worked the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, asking about families, building goodwill for what was coming next. Luke arrived at 12:30, driving his ridiculous Jeep and wearing the kind of casual outfit that probably cost more than most people's car payments. He parked with theatrical precision, making sure everyone noticed his custom wheels and expensive accessories. I watched him work the crowd, rebuilding his reputation one conversation at a time. He was good at it, charming, confident, the kind of man who made people feel important just by talking to them. I could see why Zoe was attracted to him. I could also see why she was about to be very disappointed. At 1 o'clock, Patricia called for everyone's attention. Time for the annual community updates, a tradition that usually involved thanking volunteers and announcing upcoming events. Before we start, I said, raising my hand, I'd like to share something with everyone. Patricia looked surprised but nodded. Of course, Ethan. I stood up, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes, and pulled out my phone. As many of you know, I work in architecture, which means I spend a lot of time researching and verifying information. It's a habit that carries over into other areas of my life. Murmurs from the crowd. Zoe had gone very still, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Last week I shared some concerns about Luke Mendez's development proposal. Since then, I've received several requests for more information about his professional background. Luke stepped forward, his smile tight but still in place. "Ethan, I think we covered this at the HOA meeting." "Actually, we didn't cover everything." I looked directly at him, letting my expression show exactly what I thought of his interruption. "For instance, we didn't discuss the fact that you're currently under investigation by the Texas Real Estate Commission for misrepresenting property values to clients." The crowd went quiet. Luke's face lost its color. "Or the fact that 3 of your recent projects are facing foreclosure due to cost overruns and construction delays." "That's not," Luke started. "Or the fact that you've been having an affair with my wife for the past 6 months." The silence that followed was absolute. 100 people holding their breath, processing information that would fuel neighborhood gossip for the next decade. Zoe made a sound like a wounded animal. Luke looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "I have photographs," I continued conversationally, as if I were discussing the weather. "Credit card records, hotel receipts, text messages, a complete timeline of their relationship, documented with the same thoroughness I bring to my professional work." I held up my phone, showing a photo of Zoe and Luke kissing outside the Driscoll Hotel. This was taken last Tuesday afternoon while Zoe was supposedly in a board meeting and Luke was supposedly showing properties to clients. The crowd erupted in whispers, gasps, the kind of shocked murmuring that accompanied truly spectacular public meltdowns. "Ethan, please." Zoe's voice was barely audible. "Please what? Please continue pretending that our marriage isn't a lie? Please keep enabling your affair by staying quiet and accommodating." I looked around the crowd, seeing expressions ranging from shock to fascination to barely concealed glee. "I know this is awkward for everyone," I said, "but I thought you should know who you're dealing with before you trust either of them with your business or your friendships." Luke finally found his voice. "You bastard." "Careful," I said mildly. "There are children present. And cameras." Indeed, several people were filming with their phones, documenting what would undoubtedly become the most talked-about block party in neighborhood history. "Zoe," Luke said, his voice strained, "we should go." But Zoe wasn't moving. She sat frozen in her folding chair, staring at me like I'd transformed into something unrecognizable. "Actually," I said, "I have one more announcement." I pulled out a manila envelope and held it up for everyone to see. "Divorce papers. Filed yesterday. Zoe, you've been officially served." I handed her the envelope with ceremonial precision, then turned back to the crowd. "Thank you all for your attention. I know this wasn't the kind of entertainment you were expecting, but I thought transparency was important. Enjoy the rest of the party." I walked away from the stunned crowd, past the bounce houses and face-painting stations, past the folding tables loaded with potluck contributions, past the carefully constructed facade of suburban normalcy that I'd just blown apart with surgical precision. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices as 100 conversations started at once. Shock, outrage, fascination, the kind of social chaos that would ripple through our community for months. I found Mia sitting on our front porch, having apparently arrived just in time to witness the fireworks. "Holy shit, Dad," she said. "Language. Did you really just divorce Mom in front of the entire neighborhood?" I served her papers. "The actual divorce will take a few months." Mia studied my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex equation. "Are you okay?" It was a good question. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't realized was there. Also terrified, exhilarated, and slightly nauseous. "I think so," I said. "Better than okay, actually." She nodded, accepting this with teenage pragmatism. "Mom's probably going to be really mad." Probably. And Luke looked like he was going to throw up. That was the general idea. We sat together on the porch, watching our neighbors process the social earthquake I'd just triggered. In the distance, I could see Zoe and Luke having what appeared to be an intense conversation next to his Jeep. "Dad?" Mia said quietly. "Yeah. I'm proud of you." Those 4 words meant more to me than all the applause and congratulations in the world. An hour later, Zoe came home alone. She walked up our driveway like someone approaching a crime scene, her face a mask of controlled fury. "We need to talk," she said. "I think we've said everything that needs saying. You humiliated me. In front of everyone we know." I told the truth. If that was humiliating, maybe you should have thought about that before you started lying. She stood in our entryway, this woman I'd been married to for 15 years, and I realized I felt nothing for her anymore. Not love, not hate, not even anger. Just a kind of tired relief that we were finally being honest about what our marriage had become. "I want you out of the house," she said. "Actually, you'll be the one leaving. Check the divorce papers." "I'm keeping the house." Her face went white. "You can't." "I can, and I am." My lawyer was very thorough. "The girls will be fine, better than fine, actually. They'll finally have parents who don't lie to them about everything." Zoe stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant when she realized that the man she'd been married to, the accommodating, predictable, quietly desperate man she'd been taking for granted, no longer existed. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "That makes 2 of us."